So, greetings, welcome everybody. So glad that you are listening to People, Nature, Big Ideas. Today, I have the privilege of talking with my friends and colleagues. And I've got a question for you in the audience, and I've got a question for you on the panel. When you think about outdoor recreation, what comes to mind? Maybe it's a backyard game of cornhole, maybe it's a morning run, maybe it's a dog walk, a family trip to the Y. It can be a lot of things, but it's also hiking in the Smoky Mountains. It's biking on trails that used to be timber roads or maybe even train tracks. It's fly fishing at dawn. It's bird watching in a city park. It's snowboarding, y'all, down a backcountry ridge. Sitting quietly in a forest and simply breathing is also a great way to enjoy the outdoors. But it's also a big business, a $1.2 trillion industry that now contributes more to the US economy than oil and gas, mining, agriculture, or even automobiles. And that means it's also creating real jobs in rural towns, in tribal communities, in city neighborhoods across the country. In other words, outdoor recreation is a force, and never has its value reached the levels that we're experiencing today. And the broad participation is super high, and the outdoor spaces are being recognized not just as places to visit and play, but as critical infrastructure for our health, for our economy, for our democracy. And so the question for our conversation today is, how do we keep it flowing? How can this industry continue to blossom? There are real efforts underway to sell off public lands, to gut conservation funding, to roll back programs that center equity and climate resilience. And if all of us here really care about the outdoors, who it belongs to, who it serves, this may be one of the most pivotal moments in our history. And so this episode, this conversation with my friends and colleagues is really about that moment. We're going to explore how outdoor recreation is powering jobs. We're going to talk about the impact that it has in rural communities, rural being one of the most difficult words for me to say. And we're going to talk about how it's shaping identity and why protecting public access to the outdoors truly is a national priority. And so today, my beautiful guests are my friends and colleagues. As I said, we're going to be talking to Noel Durant. He is our Tennessee State Director at Trust for Public Land. We're going to talk to Jennifer Clinton. She is our Senior Parks and Conservation Economist at Trust for Public Land. We're also going to talk to Harry Hill, who is the founder of Minority Mountain Bikers. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited. We're just going to get into it. These first two questions are for all of you all to answer. And I'll call on you so you don't have to talk over each other or do that awkward silent thing where you're really polite and you're waiting for somebody else to say something first. So my first question for you all is, what does outdoor recreation mean to you personally and professionally? And I'm going to start with you, Jennifer.
Okay. So personally, the outdoors is really where I go to ground myself, to connect myself to the world. And I think recreation helps center that in joy. So every weekend, my fiance and I, for example, we're looking for new trails to take our dog hiking. And through that, we've been able to learn a lot about each other and the place that we live by doing that. So professionally, outdoor recreation is where my interests really intersect, where, the environment and the economy overlap. So, we talked a little bit about outdoor recreation providing jobs. It's important for economic development, provides workforce opportunities to communities, healthcare cost savings to people because of the physical activity inherent in that, and improved well-being, and a whole suite of other benefits I hope we get to talk about today.
Awesome. Yeah, we're definitely going to get into it. I'm looking forward to that. Harry, what about you? What does outdoor recreation mean to you personally and professionally?
Personally, it's my escape, right? Like it's those moments when you get out there and life's problems don't go away, but at least they temporarily, take the back seat and you can get out and solo and have a relaxing time and enjoy nature, or with with just a group of friends, just get out and have a good time. That's what I enjoy most, and it was really evident during COVID when kind of everybody was stuck in the house, but yet we could get outside and go ride my bike. So that was great. I guess professionally, with minority mountain bikers, just trying to get folks together and curating these experiences for people to get out and meet other folks and go to other places and ride and have a great time.
Yeah, I love that. And Noel, I don't imagine that your response is going to be a big departure from what we've heard from Jennifer and Harry, but what does outdoor recreation mean to you personally
Yeah,
and professionally? Yeah.
thank you, Rhonda. For me personally, as I look back through the various chapters of my life, outdoor recreation has been a core part of my identity. And if you were to ask me in high school, I was a rock climber. If you were to ask me in college, I was a mountain biker. If you were to ask me, just 5 years ago before kids, I would say a backcountry hunter. And
Mm.
now my identity as a father and outdoor recreation taken on a whole new meaning because I think back of my early experiences in nature. My parents were trail builders and volunteers, and getting to experience the natural world through my early childhood set me on a path. And so that's for me right now, my identity as a father is very much rooted in the joy of nature.
Mm.
And professionally, I think of outdoor recreation right now through the lens of the Aldo Leopold idea of the land ethic.
Mm.
And when so many people are living in urban communities and are not able to recreate the Sand County Almanac experience of restoring a farm and understanding and connecting to nature on a piece of ground that they're intimately connected into by the physical work of land management. Outdoor recreation is that medium now for us to be building a new land ethic.
Mhm.
And that for me is what drives me as a conservation professional, is how we can build affinity and connection and closeness, intimacy with nature for people regardless of where they live, if it's in a rural town, on a farm, or in the middle of the large city.
I really want to call in this word around ethics. I think nowadays it's starting to get a little bit muddy when we're having these broader conversations and when we're talking about connection. And I know that there's this really interesting, and I'll say troubling dynamic with the disconnection that so many people have with our natural systems. Sometimes people have a tendency to look at the outdoors as something that is separate from everything that we do, when in fact it is so integral, regardless of where you are from within your heritage. And we go back, a millennia from wherever we came from, whatever our origin story is. Everybody had a deep and meaningful connection to nature, to land. It was a relationship. It wasn't this like intensely extractive thing. And so there is some ethics that are involved in that, Noel, and I'm really happy to hear you call that out. I was going to ask you all another question about protecting nature and expanding access and the value of that, but I think you kind of touched on that. And I think that also, as we talk through these different components of what you all are bringing into this conversation, we'll have an opportunity to tap in that. So I want to try to avoid a little redundancy. So I'm just going to stick with you, Noel, and ask you a couple of questions. You have been leading some pretty transformational work in Tennessee communities, and a lot of that has been through outdoor investments and access. And so, as you think about a project or two, I'd love to know what you've observed about how the work is reshaping and strengthening communities and how it's been influencing some of the local economies in the Tennessee region.
Thank you, Rhonda. It's been a real honor to get to be a part of the story of Chattanooga, Tennessee, my hometown, and how the city has charted a course towards economic renewal based on outdoor recreation and its embrace of its natural assets. And the two projects here that I think are really indicative of outdoor recreation and economic development are linked, and they're interesting stories. We have the Tennessee River flows right through Chattanooga. We are a river town, and the city's re-embrace of the river to create the River Walk multi-purpose trail network is the city's front porch, if you will. It is
Mm.
wherever you will see the full cross section of our community on the Riverwalk. And it has been a key economic driver. I mean, as many river towns are, many of those properties were contaminated post-industrial brownfield sites because of the industry that wanted access to the river. And the story of us being called the dirtiest city in America in 1969 to where we are today with the recent designation as the first national park city was entirely focused on our embrace of nature and the story of our community as it relates to the economic development piece is there's both the kind of direct economic benefit of the properties, the investments that are happening immediately adjacent to that trail corridor, which has been significant. A portion of the Riverwalk south of downtown Chattanooga that is seeing close to $1 billion in real estate reinvestment in that corridor, which is fantastic. It's amazing for our community. It's becoming a key economic driver for this portion of the city. But I also wanted to mention, going back to the early 2000s, we had a mayor then, Bob Corker, who was an outdoor recreationist himself. He did a ride the full length of Lookout Mountain and back, which is about 160 miles round trip. And he saw the outdoor recreationists that were rock climbing, caving, hang gliding, mountain biking in this corridor, realizing this is our identity. Let's embrace it. Let's invest in how we showcase what we have in terms of our outdoor recreation. And as it relates to our quality of life that people can have when they choose to live in Chattanooga. And that ultimately led to a decision point for Volkswagen to choose Chattanooga as a location for its North American manufacturing facility that's built in Chattanooga. And so I think that indirect economic benefit is also that the quality of life that outdoor recreation brings creates these ripple effects. And I'm not trying to take Jen's thunder, but that is important for the story of Chattanooga. And the other project ties into the Riverwalk literally, and it is our work in South Chattanooga and the communities of Alton Park and Clifton Hills and East Lake, which have been historically isolated and underinvested as it relates to park assets, as it relates to dealing with the environmental injustices of our post-industrial current time. And so that project, when we started working alongside community to understand their story and a vision of where they want to go, it is being economically connected to the rest of the city. They want to be seeing investment. And this trail might not be their end goal, but it's a key part of connecting to the broader story and bringing more interest and sort of collective community ownership over what does the future of our community look like? How are we seeing more investment and how are we gaining access and quality of life components? Many of these brownfield properties were contaminated. They had been cleaned up, but they were not doing anything besides sitting vacant. And being able to reprogram those for outdoor recreation creates the community benefit, the improvements on the health, the environment, and then the economic opportunity that comes with it. And as we think about our work in South Chattanooga, especially through the lens of historic disinvestment and injustice, those are communities of color who've been intentionally or unintentionally left behind through a variety of political changes in leadership in Chattanooga. But something that has been so really motivating and helpful for me in framing this is when we talk about the opportunities of economic growth and prosperity, those sort of racial lines in that moment, they go away and we find really strong common ground. Republican congressmen stepped up in a big way and secured over $6 million to build the Alton Park Connector for a community that was 90% Black. And that was electric in that moment. This is something that we all agree upon is an innate human need. The opportunities that are presented through outdoor recreation really transcend some of those core challenges that have been a root cause of injustice in our communities. So that was really motivating for me as we think about the story of economic development and cities like Chattanooga that are grappling with their history of racial injustice.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think you know this, Noel, that Chattanooga is my favorite city, my favorite town in all of the United States. I don't know why I didn't move there. It's not too late. I
I've
love
done, I've
Chattanooga
done.
so much.
Well, hey, it's not too late. I lived in Colorado and I've moved back to Chattanooga. So
I know that I want to turn to Jennifer and to Harry in just a moment, but first, we have something to celebrate and on a more regional scale. And I'm thinking about this Appalachia United Outdoors Initiative. And I wonder if you could briefly tell us what it means to the communities across the 8 states. And the reason why I think this is important is throughout this conversation, we're talking about the local, we're talking about the national, we're talking about things from a federal perspective, like it's all so interconnected, but none of it, it's not an either or. We do not live in a binary life. There is no such thing as only this way or only that way. It's all so interconnected. So these 8 states that are benefiting from this Appalachia Outdoors, or excuse me, Appalachia United Outdoors Initiative, would love to hear just briefly like an overview of the work and then how the rural economies have transitioned from industries like coal or outdoor rec, because this also touches on climate change. And I think that's something that people can forget sometimes. Can you share a little bit?
absolutely. And I'll be brief, but the intent of the Appalachia United Outdoors program is to help communities realize their vision for an outdoor recreation centered component of their economic future. And often communities have seen the transformative power of outdoor recreation elsewhere, have even planned and been resourced to plan their own outdoor recreation infrastructure. But many rural communities lack the technical capacity to go and do the project. And so our focus as Trust for Public Land is to be that implementing actor that comes alongside a community that has already envisioned what an economic future looks like through the outdoors and make sure we bring that to life. So that's the core thesis of how we would be working. And we've got 40 partners from climbers coalitions, mountain bike clubs, paddle sports organizations, regional conservation collaboratives who have all said the same thing. These communities want it, but they don't have the technical expertise to go and acquire or design, develop, and construct these pieces of infrastructure. So that's the essence of Appalachia United Outdoors. And for rural communities, especially rural communities that are grappling with some of the effects of climate change, like the post-Helene communities of East Tennessee and Western North Carolina. Many of those were tourist dependent before Helene, and to be able to bring back that economic driver, they need technical resources and expertise to build outdoor recreation infrastructure.
That's inspiring. Thank you. You did that perfectly. So, Jennifer. So, I have enjoyed many conversations with you. I have had the opportunity to experience a presentation or two. I have had an opportunity to read reports, and I personally, and I think others might too, I think that you've got a really unique role serving as the park and conservation economist. And full transparency, I still need to have that explained from time to time. And I imagine that there are people who might be listening, and they might even be on this panel, I don't know, who can like help us understand what does it mean to be a parks and conservation economist. And then I'd love to hear you share like what inspired you to focus your career on valuing the benefits that nature provide.
Sure thing. So I do value, Rhonda, the way your brain works and my brain works, because I do think they complement each other very well, but they are very different. This is a question I get a lot. As simply as possible, environmental economists work to study and to quantify the value of nature. That could be parks or trails or open space, but we really want to put this in dollar value terms so that we're able to bring this aspect of nature to decision-making tables where otherwise it's left out unfairly, in my opinion. So in this field, the environment provides what we call ecosystem services. or the benefits that nature provides to people. Environmental economists can use a few different techniques to quantify these benefits and estimate these dollar values. For example, there's a methodology where we can compare real estate prices for houses that are located close to green space and further from green space. And if all other things are equal on those houses, the number of bedrooms, if you have a garage, if there's a pool in the backyard, being closer to nature will always lead to being closer to high quality nature, I should say, well-maintained nature. Those lead to higher home values. So it's a way to show that there's an intrinsic value that people are willing to pay more for living near parks, trails, and open space. And that's one way to kind of get a proxy for saying, people do have a value, especially if we're looking long term, that I'm concerned gets often left out of the decision-making process. A lot of decisions are made a little short-sighted, I would say, especially lately. When we take a longer look, we recognize that these benefits are essential to our well-being. So how did I get here? I was inspired to become an environmental economist just purely because I believe and wanted to work to protect the natural environment. I grew up in a very urban neighborhood. It had very limited open space. I was surrounded by parking lots, a few scraggly little street trees, but that's kind of it. So as a kid, my parents had the foresight to connect me to summer camps and to family members, because they did not go camping themselves, to get me outside, hiking, creating nature art, doing these sleepovers under the stars. This was all through Mass Audubon, so I owe them a great debt of gratitude, honestly. And through that, I found my love of the outdoors. In college, I thought I was going to take a policy tack, but ended up learning about environmental economics through a class, and really thought and think today that it's a very effective advocacy tool. I think people who might not see the intrinsic value of nature the way I do really kind of open their eyes a little bit when you see the scale of some of the dollar value benefits that nature provides. Sometimes the job feels a little bit like the Lorax, but I think that makes it really enjoyable to go to work every day.
I love that. I think I'm probably going to mess this up, and if somebody knows better, please chime in to correct. But I think when TPL was founded, the three founders, they invoked the Lorax as their motivation for some of the work that was moving forward. I'm going to have to look that up unless Noel or you, Jennifer, know the story about that. Noel, do you know?
Well, I've heard one of the early working titles for the organization or names was Project Lorax.
That's right. That's it. That's it. That's it. I love it. So now we're gonna shift and help. You're gonna kind of be a bridge to what we're gonna talk to Harry about. You wrote a recent report on the economic benefits of mountain biking. That is a very specific report, and I love that. I love the specificity because it just helps us wrap our head around one thing at a time, as opposed to all of these complex things that we're all having to juggle in our brains. And in your research, you found that the average mountain biking tourist spends about $416 per visit, and that generates local jobs, tax revenue, and business growth. What I'd love to hear from you is, what are some of the other benefits that are not quantified in that $416 amount per visit? There's a number in the report focused on mountain bike tourism, but outdoor recreation benefits are broader than that. So would love to hear a little bit of a breakdown about, again, this broader aperture of these benefits as it relates to this mountain biking industry.
It was an incredible experience, both to collect the data and write it, and also to share it out with the world, because it's been really well received. And is probably the first report I've written that has gone, I don't want to use the word viral, but it has definitely gone a lot further into the world than I thought.
Own it, claim it, don't be shy. Congratulations,
Yeah, I mean, seeing some
celebrate.
of the download rates and the number of questions and inquiries I've gotten have been wonderful, and I'm just so glad to see it in the hands of advocates across the country. But in terms of where the report came from, there was a small community in Maine they were considering investing in and expanding mountain biking trails, but they were like, well, like, what does this mean? You know, trails we see the benefit of, but like, what can we expect from that? And what are the potential pitfalls from that? So the report has sort of two components. One is the quantified section on the dollar value of what people would spend on a typical trip, and then the indirect benefits, which I'm going to get into in a second. And then the second part is some of the inherent planning challenges that come with outdoor recreation development, specifically natural surface trails. So we're encouraging communities to have conversations with emergency services or thinking about the potential housing and infrastructure effects, right? These are not like silver bullet solutions, and they really do need to be tailored to community needs. So I think that's where the ARC work is going to be incredible over the next few years, working with those communities. But in terms of the broader picture of like, what are these benefits that we're seeing, protecting nature, at its core leads to downstream benefits like improved air and water quality, preserving scenic beauty, providing habitat to wildlife. And then outdoor recreation is sort of another level, opening up another suite of benefits where people have greater well-being, they have physical activity, social connection, the mental health benefits. There are research papers that have shown that doing the same activity, but one in nature, actually provides additional benefits above and beyond. So the experience of being outdoors is essential to that component. And then we found that quality of life and public health benefits are important to mountain biking specifically. It's a very vigorous activity, right? So it helps prevent chronic illnesses like obesity and respiratory illnesses. Mountain biking is also essential to or beneficial to mental health because it's facilitating not just connections to the natural world, but also between mountain bikers. It's a very important part of their cultural identity, and they have very strong social cohesion within the community. So I would love to hear Harry talk a little bit about that today. And then beyond the cyclists themselves, mountain biking facilitates very strong social connections among members, and we're important drivers for their cultural identity, as Noel mentioned earlier. But beyond the cyclist community themselves, mountain biking trails can help attract and retain residents, which is important to addressing the population loss, especially in the Appalachian region, and help attract new businesses. There were some case studies we looked at where we could see, even if they're not outdoor recreation, like obvious connections, like cycling stores, new restaurants or new breweries were tapping into the existence or expansion of these trails and choosing these locations because of these outdoor rec assets. And we're seeing it's just becoming increasingly important as people are more mobile and they're moving to where they find the highest quality of life rather than employment, because we can be remote these days.
That is facts. And there's a couple of things I want to appreciate about what you shared and also like help it bridge what I'm going to be asking Harry to talk about. And so I moved to Colorado from Washington, D.C. at the end of March. And so these last few months have been very much a honeymoon phase. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I came here because of the recreation. I came here because of the outdoors. And even if I don't tap into it every day, just knowing that it's an option, knowing that I'm surrounded by people who also value it, helped me feel a lot more settled, a lot more welcomed, a lot more resonant with the culture here in Colorado, more so than my own hometown in Washington, D.C. So I definitely resonate with that piece that you're sharing. And to that end, I'm also, for folks who can't are not watching this video, I am a Black woman of a certain age who has been recreating outside professionally and personally and in a very novice ways in some instances for a very, very, very long time. And my representation in these outdoor economies, in the outdoor rec industry, has been very limited. I have told stories many a time, and this is part of what brought me to TPL when I was living in Utah in the 90s. And I was, a very hardcore snowboarder and skier. I was the only Black woman on that mountain for a decade. And that's a very lonely feeling. Fast forward to today, and we've got minority mountain bikers. So who are trying to kind of relieve that pressure and that isolation and the loneliness that has come from these industries that have exclusively not been very accessible or representative. So Harry, I'm going to turn this over to you now. I'm so glad that you're joining this conversation with my friends Noel and Jennifer. You founded Minority Mountain Bikers to increase that representation and access in a space that historically has left communities of color on the sidelines. And I want to hear from you what inspired you to start that work. What inspired you to found Minority Mountain Bikers?
Thank you. I mean, I would say some of what you just said about, you were out there on the slopes. I was out there on the trails, and it's not that folks aren't welcoming, right? But it's another thing of like being the only brown or black person out riding. I would see somebody on the trail, be like, "Hey," see another black guy, be like, "Hey, you want to go ride? Like, let's go ride tomorrow, such and such a place." And you realize, like, wow, it's great to have the. I think Jennifer mentioned it, the social cohesion of mountain biking. Like it is a tight knit community, right? Like you have something that's very particular in common with others that a lot of people don't have. And so to take that from the broader group of folks and then say, okay, well, hey, now we can also have it with, people who experience life like you experience life. Like I was in the military and then in federal government. So a lot of those spaces I was especially in the military and some of the jobs I had, a couple of the jobs I had in the military, I was the only black guy, one of three in a unit of 300. So it gets draining at times. So it's nice to be able to have something where you can go out with other folks that look like you and, like I said, experience life like you. So that was the impetus to try to create this. Like it just started with local rides. Hey, we're going to go ride here. Come out and join us. And then my own personal desire to want to go out and experience mountain biking in different areas, different parts of the country. Folks were like, well, if you plan it, we'll come along or we'll come join you. And I just started meeting people from around the country. One of the first trips I did as a group was to Bentonville, Arkansas, where they have done a considerable amount of money and investment into their biking infrastructure, right? Like it's not just the natural surfaces, it's also the paved that link not just the mountain biking trails, but link the towns and link jobs. Because I think when you talk about trails, and as much as I love the outdoors and nature and getting into the woods or getting out and riding mountain bike, it's also something that can help folks, like we said earlier, reduce climate change or global warming, be able to commute to work. If your car breaks down, like if you don't lose your job because you can't get to work, now you can ride your bike. There was a lot there but I saw the good and the bad of Bentonville, or they've invested a lot of money and it does bring a lot of people. I mean, like the number, the 400 and sorry, Jennifer, I forgot the exact amount.
416.
416. But I can tell you, I've organized trips to Arkansas, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, California, Wisconsin, Jersey, Colorado, a few times, and even Jamaica. And I can tell you, I and others have spent more than $400. And there are times where people are like, wow, this is a great location, and I've even considered purchasing a second home in some of these places because, like you said, like here in the sorry, let me back up just a little bit. Like I am also in the Washington, D.C. area, or as Rhonda used to be, but it's something where I could go and have more of an outdoor life, which would be great.
Definitely, definitely. And I met you here in Colorado about a month ago when
Yeah.
it was one of those organized trips where it was Minority Mountain Bikers, BIPOC Mountain Collective, and then the Rogue military folks that
Well,
came.
that was from the BIPOC
Were
collective
they a
effort.
part of the BMC? Okay. But what was so amazing and magical about that experience, everybody came out to the mountains, folks were riding in Vail, Keystone, Salida. It was pretty magical to see how far and wide people were just for something that was just a quick, couple of days to just kind of rip it up. And I know that that left an enduring impact on me. It was less about all of my brake gripping coming down Keystone and more about how embraced I felt and the food that we share, like the breaking bread and all of those things was really powerful. So I say that to kind of lead into this question about the impact that you've seen in these places. You mentioned that people go to these various locations when you organize your trip, or we've got my bike week coming up in Bentonville next month. So people are impacting and investing in that local place whenever they're gathering, and they're investing in each other. But when you see the impacts on beyond the economic benefits and the outdoor spaces, can you share a little bit, like a story or two about those impacts?
Yeah, this picture behind me, that
Yeah.
is from Bentonville, I think 2023. So that
Mm,
was this year will be the fifth, but along the lines of the like you said with the events, I organize these and I want them to be more than just biking. Right? So it always is come in with a meet and greet so folks can meet because sometimes there's people who like you and I we had never met, and there's other people in the group. For Bentonville, I think last year we had 16 states represented. So
mm,
we ride during the day, but then I want people to come hang out in the evening. And so that kind of goes into, I think, your question about that impact on the individuals. One of the things to understand too in this mountain biking world that is there's all ranges of folks, like from education levels to professional levels, their backgrounds. Some come from projects, some come from wealthy families, some are hourly wages to positions. And so one of the stories I realized in one of the first events I planned was I had two guys who told me it was their vacation for the year, right? Like they
mm.
took the time and spent their money to come and hang out and ride bikes with the group. So, I take that that impacted me. And
Mhm.
it does show, and, back to Jennifer's point, that there is an economic benefit of kind of, what was it, Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come.
Mhm. Mhm.
Trails are important. And people do want to get outside. One of the events led to two people meeting and actually have been dating now for 2.5 years or so, somewhere around 2 years. I'm not gonna say any names, don't put any pressure on anybody. But no, there's been a lot of good relationships built. There are people who, like I said, since there's been events in different states and people have come from all over the country, on their Facebook page, someone will put on there, "Hey, I'm coming out to California. Can anybody ride with me?" And someone will say, "Yeah, yeah," they'll meet up, or I'm going
Mhm.
here, and or two people will come from different places. So even outside of the events that I've created, people will meet up, and that's just fantastic, right? That's
Absolutely.
that community, so folks could go and have places, and
And
go back to your quality of life. Like it's just a better quality of life. Getting outside, like you can go ride your bike, and all respect to my road bike friends, it's not the same. It's not the same as getting into nature and riding your bike.
I would agree. Yeah, those rocks cut different.
Hey, well, I tell my road bike friends, like, look, when you talk about how dangerous, fun you can do levels.
That's right.
You don't have to go downhill. You don't have to do big jumps. But more to the point, if I run into a tree, I ran into that tree, right? That tree didn't decide to drive out and run me over. It wasn't on the side of the trail and then came and hit me like a car might do. Like I don't have to worry about the tree being distracted and swinging a branch.
Oh
So
my God, you're taking me to the Wizard of Oz. When the trees come to life. I remember those
exactly,
those.
trees come to
Yeah,
life and want to attack you. Like
doesn't happen. Nature is our friend. Nature is our friend.
Our friend, and yeah, and we love it, and we love the trails. Trails make, like I was saying, I think one of the biggest things too is just trails to trails. That's one of the biggest things I've seen from Bentonville, and I actually just came back from Pacific Northwest and met a lady who is getting ready to start sort of an outdoor position in Squamish. And I said one of the best things about Bentonville was the fact that their trails, they have bike lanes are great, but if you can't get to a bike lane, then it's
Mhm.
not helpful, right? So like having trails that lead to trails is awesome. So having paved trails that lead to natural trails, that's fantastic.
That is fantastic. Thank you for all of that. I'm gonna start to get us to transition a little bit towards policy, because that is such an incredible driver. We've got, economic evidence for why we need to benefit. We've heard from Noel with communities just saying, hey, listen, we need this for our resilience. We need this for our well-being. We need this for our future. When we look at the headlines today, we see that there are proposed changes to public land and outdoor access, and things are getting really complex. And on the one hand, we have the Land and Water Conservation Fund that has been funding parks and trails and public spaces in nearly every county in the United States for a long time. I think it's $900 million that have been dedicated annually. And so, in many ways, I think we can say that LWCF, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, is truly a game changer. It supports everything that we're talking about today in this conversation and everything that we want to see for Noel's children and for the future grandchildren, right? And so, if we lose that funding, that ripple effect is going to be significant. And on the one hand, we've got to be concerned about the climate and environmental justice issues that are being placed on the chopping block. And a lot of people don't realize the relationship. And then we touched on it a little bit today, but the relationship that climate and environmental justice has on the well being of our outdoor recreation and conservation movements. And so, what I'm interested in understanding from you all's point of view is if we lose that conservation funding, if we end up losing these public lands that we've all talked about being so connected to and loving so deeply, what can people do about it? And I want to hear from you first, Noel, and then I want to hear from you, Jennifer. And then I'm going to twist the question a little bit differently for you, Harry. So give it to me. What do
Thank
we
you,
have,
Rhonda.
Noel?
This is a critical issue. I was actually just talking with the leader in the hunting and angling policy advocacy space about the public lands and public hands, the fight that took place during the budget reconciliation process, and a lot of folks are in Congress are seeing the clout of the public lands advocacy movement, but we're at risk of folks saying we did it. We kept the lands from being sold, but there's not the same rallying cry around funding and operations and stewardship of these public lands. And we need to keep that dialogue going. We need all those groups. And I think the hunting and angling communities, the human-powered outdoor recreation spaces, I think everyone needs to keep that cadence of this is important, not just to not sell these off, but ensure that they are well funded with the appropriated dollars through LWCF that have been bipartisan from the beginning. And then also, I think what's going to be really important, especially in the coming years, is how the hunting and angling community and the human-powered outdoor recreation community work together and support one another. I mean, there's some incredible models of conservation success in the North American model of wildlife conservation. There's some incredible stories of community transformation through outdoor recreation. How do we bring those two things together to support communities? And how do we find alignment to be singing from the same song sheet when it comes to funding, operating, and ensuring that our public lands stay in public hands?
Boom, boom, boom. 100%. Thank you for that. Jennifer, what's your point of view? What can we do if we lose these lands and these funding supports?
I have to say, this is going to be a little bit difficult for me to be hopeful, which I know we try to do in this podcast, but I've been having a really, really difficult time in the past few months and years imagining what the future of this country looks like without our public lands. I see our forests, our rivers, our coastline, our mountains, these and prairies, these are an intrinsic part of the American identity. And I think selling these lands to private interests or even other agencies that are just not as well resourced for that stewardship could be devastating if we lose these legacy landscapes. I'm the kind of person who really feels a deep connection to the place that I live. That's why I live where I do now. I live on Cape Cod, and it's a place I hadn't visited until I was an adult, and it was just instantly home. At the risk of sounding a little dramatic, it really, in many ways, like losing these lands can feel like a death. In addition to the direct and indirect benefits, like it really feels like a core part of our country's identity. So it kind of freaks me out to put it a little bit more lightly. I also think about what this means for future generations. I've talked to another economist who's similarly concerned, and she's like, the young people who were planning careers in environmental fields are looking now at what's happening at the federal level, saying like, I can't work for EPA or NOAA or the Forest Service because like that's not stable, that's not safe. And so I also think about what it means for the future of our stewardship. I know, like, if I am putting on my economist hat, one of the things we say where I live is the environment is the economy. Like I said, I live on Cape Cod, and people visit in the millions every year to swim in our beaches and hike our trails and kayak our salt marshes. And so losing conserved lands and water would really pull the rug out from the economy here. And I know that's a very extreme example. We are heavily reliant on tourism. I think that's why I got into the field that I'm in, right? So I feel like advocates can use environmental economics to highlight how nature provides benefits to people, to put it on the decision-making table in front of people who are only concerned about short-term gain or only concerned about the profits of, their company or their agency or organization. And by looking at these ecosystem services and how it's preserving and improving and, just greatly benefiting people's lives and wildlife and things like that, I think having that dollar value in your toolkit is essential for helping at least pause what's happening, if not fully reverse it.
I think it's okay to feel extreme concern and extreme emotion because there's so many things that we, I think, collectively have just assumed about our shared values.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Harry, when he was responding earlier, was touching on the value that the outdoors brought to everybody around the world during the COVID pandemic. It became the soothing, reliable, and available and affordable balm that we all utilized. And so I just don't think that 5 years ago, any of us thought that the one thing that kept us whole, the one thing that kept us united was now going to be the one thing that we had to be really concerned about losing. And I think that it's okay for you to have those feelings. And I appreciate you just being vulnerable and sharing that. So Harry, so let's imagine, I'm going to take a little bit of host liberty and share. I had a very beautiful conversation yesterday with the founder of the Eco-Inclusive organization. Her name is Parker McMullen Bushman. She's amazing. She was just sharing some information about a workshop she had just led. I'm not going to do it justice, so I'm not going to get deep into it because I haven't really learned it. But she did a futurist workshop. And one of the things that she shared was about these 4 kind of framing pillars that we can take on when we think about our future. We've got what's possible, we've got what's plausible, what's probable, and what's preferred. And being the optimist that I am, I like to live in the preferred space because that's what gives me the juice for the engine to move forward. So when I see what's probable, what is the thing that I can do to redirect that energy? What can I do to kind of put up an obstacle or a barrier to get me closer to my preferred state, our collective preferred state in the world? So what you were sharing, Jennifer, just kind of took me down that path. Harry, if we are able to keep some momentum going. We have had such a tremendous pathway that has led us to this conversation about all of these benefits that we're experiencing. And now, if we think about our preferred state when it comes to outdoor recreation and connection to land and space, if we are successful and we're able to build a thriving outdoor recreation economy, not just in terms of dollars, but in the ways that it changes people's daily lives and our communities and our connection to place. What do you think it could look like in 10 years? Is that fair? Is that a fair question to ask?
I think first, I would, for me and the realm of that I'm in, it would simply just be more people on bikes, right? Like more people on bikes, more people enjoying trails, more people getting outside. I think the momentum is there, and I think the momentum will continue when folks really start to see like, hey, you're talking about selling off the park that's down the street from me, or I think that momentum will continue and hopefully grow, and some of these possibilities that are out there right now won't come to fruition. Yeah, I hope there are more folks on bikes and just more trails. I think the more people, and that's one of the goals that I have now, is if you get more people on bikes, and that means you have a larger voice, our politicians have to listen, and they're listening and put the funding behind, put the approvals behind getting more trails built. I hate to seem like it's that simple, but like that's my hope for the future. Like that's what I see is it's plausible, it's possible,
and it's preferred.
and it's definitely preferred. And I did want to say, like, back to Jennifer's point, like some of this stuff is scary, right? Like, and Noel's point, like, it is scary, and it's really sad to see some of the funding that's being cut, some of the, these priorities changing. I have a friend that she does biking and other outdoor activities for people of neurodiverse community, and it's huge, and it's looking like she's losing almost all of her funding. And so now trying to shift and trying to figure out how to get more funding to get people out on the trails and help these kids. It does, it does, like Jennifer said, it feels like a little bit of a death, like in the family. It's sad. Future generations not having some of these things. And I think that's one of the other things I've tried to do as well. In addition to the biking events, at least once a year, but I try to do it twice a year, is have a family day at the park. What I've found is people don't even realize what's in their local parks. Like when it comes to like the trails, like you can come out. So the family days at the park, or bring your families, the folks that don't ride, so they can come out, and we'll have rides, but we'll also have guided hikes. And then after the hike and everybody gets back together, the riders and the hikers get back, we have a cookout. Just so I want people to get out and realize, like, hey, what does your local park offer? Take advantage of the trails. And then, like I said, you get more people outside, you get more voice, you get a larger voice. That larger voice turns into actions.
Awesome. Thank you. That is a perfect way to close out this conversation. I know that we're at time. And real quickly, I do want to thank you also for talking about neurodivergent communities and the disabled communities and all of the adaptive resources that we're also building into these trails to make sure that they are truly accessible to all people. We'll have to come back to that conversation at another time. So I just want to take this moment to thank the three of you, Noel, Jennifer, Harry, for joining this conversation with me. I love a well-rounded conversation with folks who are really making a difference in keeping communities whole and keeping them connected to the outdoors. And whether we're talking about the economic impact of research, and we're looking at new models of community access and bold investments in Appalachia, one thing is clear, and that is people need and they want to stay connected to the outdoors, and it belongs to all of us. So I thank you for your time, your energy, your passion, and your love for all of us collectively. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thanks so much, Rhonda.